Hello and welcome to Numeril. I'm your host, Damon the Real Nailer. We truly thank you for tuning in, and we have a magnificent show in store for you today. We're going to look at an interesting concept. It is entitled the G.A.P plan or the G.A.P plan. And we're going to look at the scripture in Romans chapter 12, verse 2. Of course, G.A.P is an acronym for something, and we're going to give it to you. And this is going to be part one. And be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. So we're going to extract three concepts from this scripture in this part one, which is the first one is conformation, then there's transformation, and last but not least, mental renewal. And how does this process go, or what are we talking about? When we start off, Paul says, don't be conformed to this world. And that would be what we would consider a rebuke. A rebuke is telling you not to do something. It's forbidding you to do a certain action. Here's what he says. Don't be obedient, submissive, and compliant to the world. Don't act in accordance with prevailing standards or customs of the world. Don't be guided and influenced by the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eye, and the pride of life. The scripture teaches us that these components or these elements make up the world. The lust of the flesh, the lust of the eye, and the pride of life. And what Paul is saying here, in essence, is that we shouldn't be guided by our sinful, lustful, Adamic pleasures, our fleshly pleasures. But when we analyze it, the enemy is using the current world system to indoctrinate us and cause us and try to tempt us and influence us to be led by those passions. But Paul is saying, hey, do not be led by them. Don't worry about the customs and the fashions and the things of the world that the world deem important. But you are not to follow and be influenced by those things. So if there is a rebuke, there must also be a correction to balance it out. So what is the correction? Okay. Paul tells us this is what we need to do to correct it. This is the transformation component. We need to change in form, appearance, nature, or character. Meaning when we look at our form and appearance, we're talking about externally, we need to transform and change. Internally, we need to change our nature and character. After we come to Christ, there should be a change in how we look externally. There should be a change in how we behave internally, because that's what transformation is. Another few words that we could use to describe transformation are adjust, rework, or shift. In essence, we have to adjust our minds and we have to rework our lives. We have to shift our mentality and our thinking. And last but not least, we have to alter or modify the way that we live. Our lifestyles have to change. And it amazes me, so many people, they wanted to live for God, but they want to live for God without making any alterations, without shifting, without making any type of adjustments. They just want to continue doing the things of the world and serve God at the same time. But Paul was saying, don't conform, but then you have to transform. You have to make some changes. You have to make some adjustments, okay? And that's what we're going to get into. Now, what is that? Here's the mental renewal. He said, but be renewed in your mind, okay? So our minds, how do we renew our minds? Our minds will be renewed if the concept of renewal means to become new, to begin again, or to experience reprogramming or reconfiguration, which means that this goes along with the born again experience. When we're born again, we're able to see and understand the kingdom of God. And what happens, we start anew, we start afresh, because when we're first born, we're indoctrinated by the world system, how to live in our flesh and how to do physical things. But all of a sudden, once we get born again, all of a sudden we have to start learning spiritual things. We have to start learning how to live holy and righteous. So we have to be reprogrammed and reconfigured, because the way we're initially programmed and configured goes against God. And this process is done by feeding the mind new and fresh, godly, positive and inspirational material. Now, I find that many people are not familiar or don't fully grasp the concept of mental renewal. And that's a revelation that God gave me, which is very simple. You must feed your mind new material for it to be renewed. You can't keep living on old manna from yesterday and yesteryear, and call yourself being renewed. You have to give yourself some new, fresh information, some new, fresh insight, so that you can gain new perspective. Your perspective can be broad, and your outlook can grow. But if you're constantly feeding yourself the same thing, then you're not being renewed. It's like when you go to get an inspection sticker for your car. Typically, they shave off the old one and they put a brand new one on. They don't just change out a number or something like that, or just tell you to sign your name here and it's the same. No, they give you a brand new sticker, and that's what has to happen. We have to feed our minds and impart to our minds brand new material, and as we do that, our minds will be renewed, our minds will be changed, and our minds will shift. And typically, I know for me, before I met Christ, I was feeding my mind just all kinds of toxic, unrighteous, evil material. And what happened once I got saved, I stopped conforming to those things, because that was the way of the world. I was into the hardcore and the ungodly hip hop scene and things of that nature. But once I got saved, I couldn't adhere to that anymore. I couldn't conform, then be influenced by that anymore. So I had to change, and I had to start listening to positive music, to gospel music. I had to begin to read new material to change the things that I was viewing and watching and entertaining myself with. And after I started employing and feeding myself these new things, my whole mentality changed. Not just my mentality, but my nature, my appearance, my form, my lifestyle shifted and changed and became altered. And that's how the renewal process occurs, or should I say the transformational process occurs. It occurs by us feeding and renewing our minds. If you don't renew this mind, then your life won't be renewed, because this is the initial process. All stimuli we come into contact with, it comes into contact with this first. And if we don't get this straight and get this renewed, then the rest of us won't be renewed. We truly thank you for tuning in. We hope that you've received some revelation and insight. Tune into part 2, because we'll further break down this concept of the G.A.P plan. And I will reveal what the G.A.P means on the next episode. Thank you, and God bless.